Mark, you had a really well-read piece out on the Bloomberg today talking about that Gurman expectation, the worst-case scenario. But actually, even without a retaliation, could we see some sort of boycott? How much could trade tensions already be hurting the Chinese business?
Yeah, we think there is going to be an informal boycott of sort. You know, when there's an America and China is not really fond of America right now and the Trump administration and these tariffs because of how it's going to impact their economy. And when these types of things happen, you see them sort of latch on to their own brands. Huawei, in many respects, is the Apple of China. It has been called that by many people. People love Huawei there. So if people are going to choose in China between an iPhone or a Huawei device, they might lean towards Huawei just because of the tariffs in this trade situation and specifically what's going on with Huawei right now with this impending U.S. ban.
Jean, as someone who's running these numbers, we've heard Tim Cook before sort of blame the slowdown to a certain extent about laying it at the feet of trade tensions between the US and China. How real a threat do you think this is going to come in terms of the bottom line for Apple now?
I would agree 100% with what Mark is saying about this boycott Apple campaign that indefinitely is going to start in China. But I want to put to rest some people's fears around a trade tariff from Chinese putting that on Apple products, like what Gurman was talking about. I think that is unlikely. We have recently spoke with people, former U.S. trade officials, and I think what's most important here is even the people who understand the intimate workings of how these progress don't know how this is going to play out. But one thing that has been reiterated to me is that Apple is an important partner for China. Approximately in total, about 3 million people's jobs are impacted by Apple in mainland China. So I think that even though that captures a good headline about a tariff, I think it is unlikely that that in fact will happen.
Interesting perspective there. Mark, from what you're seeing at the moment in terms of Apple trying to preempt, we know that Huawei's already preempted this. They apparently have 3 months worth of supply. They managed to pre-order and ensure that they've been stockpiling. Has Apple been looking at changing in some way its supply chain? Can it? It's such a juggernaut and China is so important.
I think if Apple was going to shake things up in terms of its supply chain, it would take a matter of years, 5 to 10 years for a full transition. Apple's manufacturing in China is not as simple as popping iPhones out of China through Foxconn and then shipping them out elsewhere in the world, all the way to the United States and elsewhere. It's this vast network of suppliers, not only in China, but in Taiwan, Korea, other parts of Asia. Some stuff comes from the US, some from Europe, pretty much all over the world, that is then sourced and funneled into China for final assembly. So it's so much more than just one factory or one, as they call it, a city in China to build these things. It's a vast array, and all those moving pieces pretty much is going to make it impossible for any significant changes in the near term to occur.
There is potentially some silver lining, just maybe, and it's the element that Google's Android operating system is going to be hit to a certain extent by no longer being able to do business with Huawei. Is there any way in which international demand outside of China could pick up for Apple smartphones if the operating system of the higher-end Huawei's in some way is hit?
Yeah, for sure. Apple is not as strong as some of the other makers outside the United States. In the US, Apple is obviously the strongest provider, but in China we see a proliferation of Chinese brands there. But in Europe, Huawei has a strong stronghold there. They are about 20-25% of the market, according to some of the latest statistics. So if Android is going to go away, it's going to make those Huawei devices less appealing to consumers, and some customers are going to look for other devices. And if you're in Europe, you might not be going for those Chinese brands. You're going to look at something like an iPhone. So I think from that perspective, Apple has a lot of positivity there. I just don't think it's going to move the needle. And to Jean's point earlier about what the overall impact to Apple will be, you're going to see a little bit of a negative impact to Apple in China, but you might see that positive impact happening in Europe and other regions. So at the end of the day, it's very plausible that this will just simply even all out.
Yeah, Jean, net this out for us. Is there going to be some pro for Apple that's now able to offset the weakness that we therefore see in China?
I think Mark has a good point. There's some opportunities, but I just want to net this out here. What's going on in China is a net negative, but it's not nearly as negative, I think, as people are expecting. And if I was going to try to put this in its most pointed terms, is that mainland China is 10% of their business. That may be impacted by a few percent. They might pick up a percent in other parts in the country. So think of this as probably a 1 to 2% headwind to revenue. This is not a 25% risk.